Orphan Train Rider, One Boy's True Story. Chapter 11. Lee loses one brother and finds two more. Part 2. I will begin on page 68. While Lee was still in Germany, the family received word of a tragedy. Gerald had been on a Japanese prison ship when it was sunk by sailors on an American submarine who did not know that American prisoners were on board. The little brother whom Lee had cared for on the orphan train was dead. Lee returned from World War II unharmed, but grieving for Gerald. He became a food store manager, and he and Novelle devoted themselves to their children. They also took care of Ollie Nailing in the years before her death. The family settled in Atlanta, Texas, a town of 6,000 near the village where Lee had grown up. He was active in the church and local organizations and was honored by the Chamber of Commerce as Man of the Year for the many ways he had helped his town. After Lee retired, he and Novelle remained involved in volunteer groups, visited back and forth with Leo and his family, and enjoyed their grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Their daughter, Jer Lee, married J.R. Loomis. Lee Nailing Jr. married Jenny Warren, and they became the parents of Brian, Teresa, and David. Brian and his wife Dawn now have a son named Christopher. Teresa, inspired by her grandfather's story, adopted a little boy named Joshua. Then in 1984, when Lee was 67 and thought life could hold any more surprises for him, he got one of the greatest of all. After a story about him appeared in the newspaper, Lee received a letter from a man who had been friends with his older brother, Fred. The man said that Fred had recently died, but that Lee's oldest brother, Ross, was in Florida. Included in the letter was a phone number. Lee immediately dialed the number. In his Texas accent, he asked if he was speaking to Ross Clement, who used to live near Watertown, New York. He was. The voice with the New York accent belonged to his big brother. Ross told Lee that both he and his sister Evelyn had tried to find him, Leo, and Gerald. At different times, they had gone to the Children's Aid Society, only to be told that the children had been sent far away and there was no way to trace them. Ross said that Evelyn was dead too. After the family split up, he and Fred had grown up together on the streets. Fred had not had children, but he had taken great pleasure in paying for summer outings for several orphans every year. We used to run into our father once in a while, but he barely acknowledged us, Ross told Lee. He was a broken, bitter man when he died. And as far as we know, he died alone. I have to tell you, Lee, I just think he was no good. Otherwise, he wouldn't have given up all us kids. Lee was not ready to agree with that. That day, he gave me the pink envelope. Lee remembers that Dad was crying. I think he really cared about us. I often wonder how it would have changed things if I hadn't lost that envelope. Ross said that George, the baby brother who had been taken away by family friends after the death of their mother, still lived in New York. Then Lee told Ross about Leo, and he had to tell Ross that Gerald had died in the war. Of the original family, Evelyn, Fred, and Gerald were dead. But Ross, Lee, Leo, and George were alive, and they wanted to get to know each other. Lee and Novelle's children, Jer Lee and Lee Jr., organized a reunion. People heard about it, many of them learning about orphan trains for the first time, and the Chamber of Commerce planned a party for the brothers. On Memorial Day 1984, a car pulled up to the Nailing home. Lee stood by the window watching it. He had been unable to sleep that night before because he was so excited. I'm not sure I can explain my emotions, he said. I wondered if Ross and I would feel any kind of bond, if we would know we were family. I guess what worried me was that there wouldn't be any feeling between us. He saw a small man with a wavy white hair get out of the car, and then he ran out the door and down the walk to throw his arms around the brother he had not seen for 60 years. It was wonderful, Lee said. No one can imagine the feeling. This was my brother, and I loved him. The moment of knowing that is frozen in time for me. George and Leo and their families soon arrived, and the brothers spent the weekend getting to know each other. Those were some of the happiest days of my life, Lee remembers. Ross died a few years ago, and I'm very grateful I had some time with him. I feel so lucky to have found him. George and I are in regular touch, and I often see Leo since he lives nearby. Lee speaks frequently to school children about his experiences as an orphan train rider. He shows children the scar on his arm where the boy at the orphanage stabbed him with a fork as he reached for a biscuit. He tells them about the pink envelope and about being separated from Gerald and then being taken away from Leo when he got to Texas. He tells them about the dead chicks. Sometimes when he has finished speaking, children will come up to him to talk about the problems in their lives. Fathers who don't live with them, or mothers who drink, or money troubles that keep their families moving around. Lee tells them that their attitude toward what happens to them is the key to their lives. I was bitter for a long time, he said to them. I let that bitterness eat at me, and it wasn't good for me. I was fortunate to get loving parents who were able to help me put away the bad things that happened to me so that I could focus on the good. But I have met many orphan train riders who had terrible things happen to them and who didn't get good families, and on their own they determined to have good lives and have done that. You can too. In 1994, Lee received an award named for Charles Loring Brace from the Orphan Train Heritage Society. It is given each year to a rider who has helped people learn about the orphan trains. Lee is proud of the award. He believes that Americans should know about the orphan trains and their role in history. When Lee looks back on his life, he believes himself to be one of the luckiest orphan train riders. I always felt that I had a guardian angel watching over me, he says. When I got off that train in Texas, I was a bitterly unhappy little boy with a heart full of grief. The good Lord saw to it that I ended up with the nailings. That was where I belonged. And that concludes Chapter 11 of Orphan Train Rider.